Hi, everybody. Cindy and Sandie from CL Performance Training here. We plan to be with you every second Monday at 12:30 for a talk about something related to endurance sport, triathlon, running, cycling, and swimming. We are both coaches. We write programs for people trying to train for marathons, triathlons, cycling events, adventure races. Anything that is endurance sport related will help guide you, write you a training program, and help you out when it comes to reaching your goals for specific events or just for being fit in general. So if you have any questions for us outside of what we're talking about here, feel free to send us a message. You can email us at clperformancetraining@gmail.com.
Okay, there we go. That's who we are. And today we're talking about indoor cycling training because it's the season. And one of the first things we wanted to talk about is why do we do indoor cycling training at this point in the year? And mostly it's to focus on your training and not trying to survive the snow and the elements and being whacked off by a car. But it's also a really great time to build your fitness and your strength and endurance and some mental resilience, and an opportunity to focus on your form and cadence and your posture. And as the season builds, you get into longer rides and different kinds of rides that we'll talk about. And it's a great opportunity to really zero in and focus on some of these things.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely also, you don't want to lose what you spent last season building. So although it's important to switch gears in terms of what type of workouts you're doing, which we will talk more about in other sessions as well, and it is important to take a break for a couple of weeks, perhaps from your primary sport. We don't want you to take weeks and months off, or you're going to back up more than you want to back up, more than you need to back up. We want you to maintain your fitness through that off season. And indoor cycling in a place like Toronto or Canada in general, where it's not warm all year round, that's what we've got to deal with. So we're going to embrace it. We're going to talk about why it's good for you, even in the summertime, and how you should go about getting yourself set up and ready to do some indoor cycling.
Right. So let's talk about your setup first. And one of the things that, if someone is a newer cyclist or just doesn't have an indoor trainer, can you talk a little bit about the difference between a spin bike, or is that a useful way to do indoor training?
So it's better to do something rather than nothing. We'll start there. So if you don't have an indoor cycling trainer where you can put your own bike on a trainer and ride it, a spin bike is an alternative that will work for you. It's not exactly the same. So one difference is it's not your bike. It's not going to be set up the same way as your bike is set up. Your muscles will therefore work a little bit differently. You'll have a ton of crossover. You'll build a ton of fitness, even using the spin bike, just not quite as much as you would if you're on your own bike. The other thing that's different is that the way that the freewheel works on a spin bike is different. So if you're on a spin bike and you're pedaling quickly, fast RPM, you'll notice that when you stop pedaling, your legs keep moving, right? That doesn't happen on your bike at home. But the biggest difference, like I said, is the actual position that you're in. You want to try to get in the position of your own bike as closely as possible to get the maximum amount of benefit from that spin bike.
And that's difficult to do,
bike,
right? Because there are only preset settings, and it can be really. And if you don't really know, you have to go by feel, perceived feel. But the benefit, you can develop aerobic fitness from that. You can work on leg strength. You can work on cadence variation and single leg drills without. You can still work on those things. You can still clip in to your pedals and do that kind of work. So you can get a good workout, but it's as Cindy mentioned, there are quite a few differences. So then the other question that comes up is, should I use my road bike or put my tri bike on the trainer? So why don't you talk about that?
Yeah. So again, two parts to that answer. Like I just said, you want to train as specific as you can to how you're going to race. That being said, we also think about a whole season and how we periodize it to get ready for an event. And one thing that we do is we focus on strength in the off season, which for most of us would be right now. And how that has to do with what your question was is riding a road bike this time of year can be helpful because it focuses more on your glutes and your hamstrings. So you can build strength in your hamstrings and your glutes a little bit differently and in a beneficial way by riding a road bike this time of year if you have that option. When we get to the new year, assuming you have, again, a race season like we do, which starts in May, June, come the new year, you'll want to get on your tri bike ideally, because position's a little bit different. You want to get used to spending time in the aero bars. The way you use your muscles is a little bit different. You'll use the front part of your leg a little bit more. Just the angle through your hips will be a little bit differently. So to answer that question, if you have a road bike and a tri bike and an indoor trainer, there is benefit to using your road bike right now. Come the new year, put that triathlon bike on and start riding in a more specific position.
Okay, great. So let's talk about technology for a moment, because there are so many options and so many pros and cons to technology. So, there's dumb trainers and smart trainers, and the difference between those two would really be the smart trainers have the opportunity to take control of your ride and give you power and watts and cadence and all the different metrics for feedback. But it can also change the tension so that you just have to ride and it will change for you, rather than having to use your gears for that. A lot of people use a software like Zwift or Trainer Road or Ruby, those sorts of things. And those can be really helpful, and they can help alleviate the boredom. They can help motivate and incentivate, if you wanted to get into some of the races or competitive things, or you're watching how many badges you earn and that sort of thing. If you're really into gaming, that really helps you with that. It can also be social, because you can text people or chat away with people while you're riding. One of the downsides of using those kinds of things is you can get carried away. If you have a free ride, for example, you haven't been given a file or a specific workout to do, and you get caught up in chasing some other person on Zwift, or you start chasing your own personal best when you're supposed to be doing something else, it's easy to sort of get caught up in that and then overtrain or overdo it, which is not the point of what you were supposed to be doing in the first place. So we can write workouts for you and give you a file that will take you through what you're supposed to be doing. But if you completely ignore that or don't have your FTP, your settings set up properly, it can be a challenge for you. Mm-hmm. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it depends on what kind of person you are, to be honest. I think that some athletes love to have all kinds of different metrics and stats as they ride. They like to watch something like Zwift or Ruby's another platform that people tend to use for cycling, or Trainer Road. Versus other people like me, when I was racing, I would just set the power on my trainer and stare at the wall and be happy. So it depends on what kind of person you are. As a coach, it's nice when someone has Zwift, because I can write a workout and include a file that they can then load in, and I know they're going to do it pretty much perfectly. But like Sandie said, if you don't have a file that you're loading in, it is really easy to get caught up in the competition of Zwift, having other people around you. The challenges, the sprints, the king or queen of the mountain, all that stuff is hard to ignore if you are just doing a free ride. So there's pros and cons. You need to be able to control yourself, and you need to be able to listen to what your goal is for that day. Should you be using that? And don't feel like you have to use that. Some people, like I said, like myself, might be a little bit more simple when it comes to that, and might like to just set the power, set the effort, and pedal, and that's totally fine and okay too.
Mm-hmm. And that's good to keep in mind when your technology doesn't work, because I've had so many times where something's not syncing up and something's not working, and you can spend a lot of time trying to fix it, or trying to get annoyed with your technology because you don't have cadence, or you don't have this or that. And that can really take apart your training session if you really get hung up on that. So sometimes it's a good idea just to turn it off and do what Cindy is talking about, just ride, mm-hmm. and not let those failures take your workout apart.
Yeah.
And that usually that's when you're just trying too hard to do too many things, and it's like, all right, step back.
One of the, I think when it comes to indoor training, one of the great things about it is that it allows you to be more specific in what you're doing. So if you are doing a specific interval workout, there's not going to be a hill in the way, right? So that you can start and end your interval at the right time. You can maintain steady power if you have a trainer that gives you power or a steady heart rate without a stoplight or, an intersection getting in the way and causing you to take a break. It also gives you a really good opportunity to practice drills such as
Yeah.
cadence drills, really to ride at low RPM, to do intervals and practice on your efficiency, which we should talk a little bit about how to be efficient in your pedal stroke. So the specificity is something that's really a bonus of indoor training. It's also harder than riding outdoors. So depending on the kind of trainer you're using, it can be 10 to 30% harder to do a workout on the trainer. So your time is more efficient. So like, a 1 hour ride outdoors can be done in 50 minutes indoors. And if you expand that to what you might be doing to train for an Ironman or a Century ride, if each hour outdoors is equivalent to a 50-minute indoors, you can think about how you can save 30 or 60 minutes even on some of those long rides by doing them on the trainer instead. So what are some of the drills that we use? What are some of the things that we tend to teach our athletes when it comes to cycling?
Well, let's base that on how a typical workout would be structured. For example, the warm-up. You've got usually some easy pedaling just to get warmed up for 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how long you're going to be on there. And then there are some, I guess, short segments where you're getting your heart rate up and where you're raising your heart rate for a short length of time and then a recovery. And that's really it's like priming a pump. You need to get your body started and warmed up and warmed up, not just your muscles moving and your legs moving, but also your heart ready to take on the main set of your workout. Your main set may have a whole bunch of different things depending on the where you are in your training. You may have some drills, there may be some intervals, there may be some high and low cadence sessions where you're going between. Maybe there's a progression of power. Maybe there's some standing and seated climbs. So it can include an awful lot of those things. And they all have a specific purpose and a reason for being given those. Sandie, would you want to talk about some of those that I mentioned and the benefit of them?
Yeah, so I think that the first one I want to talk about is just riding at a low RPM. We don't want you to do races at a low RPM usually, unless you're a specific person. That's kind of an outlier. But there's a lot of benefit to training with low RPM. One is building strength in your legs. One is recruiting more muscle fibers because you're able to go around more slowly. You're able to focus on efficiency. And when I talk about efficiency, there's some keys that you can think about while you're riding. A lot of people, when they first get on a bike, it seems pretty simple. You're going to push the pedals down, right? You're going to mash one leg down, then the other leg down. If we want to get really fancy, we think, okay, we're going to pull up on the pedal. We're going to push down, then we're going to pull up. There's a lot more to it than that. In fact, you can be the most efficient or more efficient than that if you actually think about almost like cross-country skiing. So if you think about kicking forward and pulling back rather than pushing down and pulling up, you'll find that if you're looking at your power, your heart rate, you're going to be able to push more power at the same heart rate or a lower heart rate if you do that because it's more efficient. So kick forward, pull back. Again, you want to add a layer to that on that pull back. If we think about your pedal stroke as a clock, give it a little bit of a pull up, right? So pull back 4 to 7 and then a quick snap up of the hamstring. We come up over the top. Think about kicking your leg over your handlebars. And then again, we're at the 4 o'clock. So we're pulling back again, quick snap up of the hamstring, and we're ready to kick forward over the handlebars again. Try thinking about that when you're cycling. I think that all of us, or the majority of us, will notice a pretty big difference when it comes to power versus heart rate. And the benefit of the low cadence is that it basically allows us to exaggerate all of that. It gives us a lot more time to do it. It's easier to practice. It's easier to notice if you have what we call dead spots. There's spots where you're not producing power within that circle. So it just allows us to exaggerate and get better at all of the little pieces. And like I said before, it just gives you the opportunity to engage more muscle fibers as well and teach your body how to use more muscle fibers so that when we go back to riding at 85 to 90 RPM, like most of us want to race, our body is just a lot more efficient at doing that and has more to use, more power to use to do that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Single leg drills are another way of sort of identifying where those dead spots are that you were talking about. So you don't need to unclip from your pedals. Just focus on one leg at a time and think about going through that perfect circle and then compare to the other leg when you're doing it. And that's it's a really good way to just realize if you've got a weaker side or just an area where you're feeling it's different. It gives you an opportunity to really focus on that, and way easier to do that on an indoor trainer during the winter than being out, outside when you're riding and thinking, oh, let me just do a single leg drill.
Yeah. A
um,
good time to do single leg drills too is like Sandie said in the warm up, but also at the end of your workout. So, our form tends to break down when we get tired. So why not teach it to be better when we're tired, right? So when you're done your main set, your body's tired, ready to get off the bike. Also a good time to do some of those one leg drills and just say, hey, body, you know what? This is not how you should pedal when you're tired. Here's a reminder of how to be more efficient.
Exactly. And then when it comes to sitting and standing climbs, definitely that the use of your muscles through that full circle really helps with this seated climb for sure. I know that when I got to climbing, going across Italy, going through those mountains, you could really feel the difference when you're having to use the full range of that pedal stroke and the lower cadence and using your core to stabilize yourself for that. It was made a huge difference for that. Standing climbs, you can talk about those. I hate them.
I have a couple things to add there. So that's one thing that's also a benefit of indoor trainer. You can climb hills that take 10 minutes to get up. We don't have those.
Yeah.
At least not where I live here in Burlington. So you can create whatever kind of hill you want to create. Just backing up a little bit, one more drill that I think everyone should think about and practice. It teaches you how to ride with your hips. And by that, I mean, use your glutes. Really big muscles, really powerful muscles. We should be riding with our glutes. And one drill that I find is helpful to teach you how to do this is actually trying to ride without putting much or any pressure on the ball of your foot. So trying to ride with your foot just pulling against the top of your shoe. You try it. Do it for 30 seconds, 60 seconds at a time at different powers. And it really helps to teach you how to engage your hips, because you have to engage your hips to be able to ride like that. Again, something else to remind yourself as you get progressing through your ride and your body gets a little bit tired. So yes, standing climbs. You don't want to do too much of that as triathletes or as time trial riders when we're out there in a race. However, there is benefit to it in training. And I say triathletes and time trial riders because we are not drafting. We have a different style of riding than a road rider. A road rider will likely stand in a race, because if they get dropped on a hill, they might never catch up again. Probably not if they lose that pack. So I'm going to answer this based on time trialing and triathlon riding. Standing climbs will drive your heart rate up. You'll feel it when you start doing some of those intervals. So we don't want to drive our heart rate up in a race. We want to keep things as steady as we can. However, in training, it can help us build some strength in our legs, build some strength in our hips, build some strength in our core, and help us with efficiency with climbing. So when you're doing a standing climb, you want to try not to put a ton of weight on the arms. So you want to still try to keep your weight further back on your bike. You want to use your core, you want to use your hips. And again, you want to think about an efficient pedal stroke. It won't be a kick forward and a pull back so much, but it will be a pull back a little bit and an up, so that 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock little tug with the hamstring, and then pulling up from that 7 o'clock to 12 again will be more emphasized when you're standing climbing to be a bit more efficient than it is when you're seated. Your body will push your legs down. You've now got your whole body weight pushing it down, so you can focus on pulling those legs around and back up again. Holding a good solid posture is important when you're standing climbing. So we don't want to be hunched over. We don't want to be shrugging up to the ears. You want to maintain that nice, strong upper back, nice, strong core, so that you're not crushing your lungs, right? You're wanting to keep that open so that you can get more oxygen in. You can get more oxygen to your muscles that you need to use. You can keep your breathing nice and deep. So just watch that posture a little bit more when you're standing climbing than when you're in your saddle.
And I think one of the challenges with standing climbing on an indoor trainer, depending on what kind of trainer you have and what gearing you're using, is because when you're outside riding with that standing climb, it's just a different feel. You have your body weight and the feel of the bike. It's just easier to do. When you're indoors, often you'll get just that clunk, 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 and you can't get on top of it. And that to me tells me that my legs aren't strong enough to be doing that. I need to hover and really hold that position, so that I'm not just doing the downstroke. You have to really focus on that
Yeah.
hovering to be able to get the strength of that upstroke.
And by the way, hovering is another good drill to do. That's what we should do on our Tuesday class tomorrow. Another way to build strength is doing standing climbs where you're hovering and you're trying not to let your head bounce at all. That is one way to make the quads and the hips burn. We'll do some tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, good. I'm glad I brought that up. So the other thing that I wanted to also include was the cool down. A lot of people, you get kind of tired and it's like, okay, whatever, I did my workout. Why do I even bother with the cool down? Why is that important to include in your workout? That's a question for Cindy.
Sorry, I'm writing a note about something else I wanted to talk about. Why should you do a cool down?
Yeah, why is that important?
Your muscles will recover way better. So if you are, a multi-sport athlete, you may have another workout to do later in the day. I'm just sorry, guys. I'm just going to change rooms here. If you're a multi-sport athlete, you may have another workout to do later in the day. So by doing that cool down on the bike, you will be better able to complete your second of the day later on. Your muscles will be less tired, less sore, and they'll basically just be ready for what's next. They'll be able to loosen up. They'll be less likely to get injured. We have to do a cool down. A cool down is important, and it also is the time when people cut off or they leave the class, or they want to stop early because they have to get on to the what's next in their day.
Mm-hmm. And I think also when it comes to building resilience mentally, mental strength and resilience, hanging in there and sticking in with that time. It could be a 30-minute cool down after your main set. Hang in there and do that, because it's really worth to build the fitness and also just to build the mental strength of, yeah, I did that. I didn't bail on my workout.
Yeah.
You
One
get
thing I was writing down to make sure that we mentioned was riding an arrow position on the bike.
Mm-hmm.
Trainer. So you don't have to ride an arrow position all the time on your trainer. It's hard for a lot of people because indoors there's no airflow, or there's not as much, even if you have a fan. You tend to get really hot in the core in arrow position and therefore not be able to push as much power, not be able to perform as well. So me as a coach, I'm okay with you not riding an arrow position all the time. I think, like my answer to what bike should I ride, as you get closer to your race, it becomes more important for you to ride an arrow. But right now, in our off season, you don't need to ride an arrow much. So do your recovery pieces in arrow to keep yourself used to that position rather than doing your power pieces, for example.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of arrow position, I find that one of the things that people forget to do is they'll let their head hang like that and just ride and ride and ride. And then when you get to taking your bike outside and you start doing outdoor riding, now suddenly you've got tension in your neck and you haven't got the strength in your to hold your head up, because you have to actually see where you're going. And so that's something to keep in mind when you're getting closer to outdoor season. Make sure you spend some time looking up, or looking, at least keeping your chin lifted. It's better for your breathing, but it's also helping to strengthen the back of your neck and between your shoulder blades.
Yeah.
Posture is I find that posture is something that you tend to forget about when you're doing those long rides. If you've got an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, it's easy just to sort of collapse in, like you were saying, Cindy, about getting your chest falling down. Same thing on the road bike, and especially if you're having troubles with getting the numbness in your hands. You want to keep moving your hands around, go down on the drops, do different things down there. But keeping your posture really helps. If you think about keeping your shoulders back and sliding your shoulder blades down your back, it actually lifts up your chest and keeps your upper body stronger. And then you start to use your core more because you're having to hold yourself up, which then makes you stronger through the pedal stroke. So the whole posture thing, when it starts to fall apart and you start to get tired, think about it going, hold on, let me just come back to my posture and make sure that I'm holding it properly, and it'll feel better.
Mm-hmm.
And smile.
Yeah, it does. It really makes a difference.
It does.
So we have a question from someone here that says, what about long indoor rides for an early Ironman? How do we stop them from being boring?
Oh, yeah.
So that's a good question. Again, we are in Ontario. I'm not sure where you might be watching, but when you sign up for an early Ironman, January, February, March, it means you're doing all of your long rides inside on your indoor trainer, unless you come to a training camp. So, it can be boring, it can be long sometimes, but that is one of the ways that we want to train. We don't want to, be necessarily always watching movies or always chatting with a friend or always, distracting ourselves during those long rides and then get to the race and being like, oh my gosh, now all I have is inside my own head and I can't deal with myself. So we do want to practice getting through some of that boredom sometimes. However, it can be a lot week after week after week. So what I used to do when I was doing a lot of these long rides is I would break it up into 1 hour chunks for one thing. So I would focus on one thing for an hour and then I would get off and I would go to the bathroom or walk around or whatever for a couple of minutes, get back on, do the next hour. It's okay to do that. It's not going to be detrimental to you to take 2 minutes off every hour. It helps to segment everything in your mind, just like you'll do in the race. The first hour you could work on technique. The second hour you could start doing some builds or alternating between zone 2 and zone 3 or some race pace intervals with some recovery pieces. Just breaking up that time can be a way to pass the time. Put on a movie for part of the ride. Like that sounds crazy, but some of your rides will be 5 or 6 hours, right? You can watch a movie and you still have 4 hours left. So my best advice is break those workouts up into pieces of some sort. And those are just a few ideas on how to do it. If you're going to add some intervals into those long rides, you do want to make sure that they progress as you work your way through. You don't want to do, hard 2-minute zone 4 intervals in the first hour. And then in the last hour, be so tired that you are riding at 80 watts or whatever, right? So you do want to always teach yourself to get stronger as you go through a workout. So create those intervals so that they get more challenging as you work through that workout.
Mm-hmm. I would say also to help break down the boredom, if this is where technology can really help you. If you're on Zwift, there are groups who do longer rides, challenge century rides, that sort of thing, or just do, for a couple of hours, watch the chat and pay attention to that sort of thing. And, you can also get social. You can maybe get a group of other people who are training and chat, do a private group ride on Zwift, and that keeps each other company. There's another software that I'm aware of called Watch. And I think if you put a movie on, then it can synchronize with what's going on in the movie. So while it's, an action scene, you're going to it's going to make your bike speed up. And then if it's a slower romantic scene, then it's going to be slower. It's there. I don't know that it's necessarily the best training tool if you're supposed to be, doing a workout, or if you're watching something that's constantly action and then you've overtrained yourself. But, there are technologies out there that help. And then there's good old music.
Yeah.
On your favorite soundtrack and just, dance and practice what you're doing. But, as you said, Cindy, when you're out doing a long race, a long bike ride like that, you really do need to be able to rely on what's in your head and practice those mantras, that keep you going. Like, whatever it is, it's going to help you get through that.
Yeah.
It's a good time to do it.
And sometimes just thinking about music, and thinking about what I would do and have done is it can make you crazy watching the seconds go by when you have 6 hours of riding to do. So it can be helpful to cover the time and say, you know what, I'm going to let 3 entire songs go by and then I'm going to look at it again. Right. Mm-hmm. So playing little games with yourself like that. The other thing is those minutes feel so long sometimes when they're going by. But remind yourself that when it's over, it's going to feel like it wasn't so bad. Right. So at the moment they seem so long, but once you're done, it all seems a little more reasonable. So just play with the way that your thinking process works a little bit.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
But it's not easy. It's not easy. In no way are we trying to tell you, it's an easy thing to do. It's really hard. That's why most people don't do it. So what you guys do, if you're watching this video, is not a common, normal thing. You should be really proud that you do it, but keep in mind that, we're a special population.
Yeah, for sure. The other thing to keep in mind is making sure you're comfortable, because it can be quite a different experience riding outside versus indoors on the trainer. You may have to change what kind of shorts and chamois you're wearing. You may need to change in the middle of your session because it's just gotten too uncomfortable and you need a break from that particular outfit or kit. Making sure you're wearing, use chamois cream. just because you're indoors doesn't, you're still having the same, sometimes more challenges with your saddle. I would say that look at those things before you start thinking that your bike fit doesn't work, because you're riding differently when you're on the indoor trainer.
Yeah.
And if you've got a comfortable fit when you're outdoors, doesn't mean you start needing to change everything just because you're on the trainer. It is a different experience, but make sure you've got a fan, make sure you've got a towel for your sweat to protect your bike too, because it can really get into the headset of your bike and cause havoc there. Make sure your tires are inflated. Make sure your nutrition and your hydration are still being paid, you're paying attention to those, because you're probably sweating more from being indoors. So your hydration is really important. It's not just water. You do need your electrolytes and your recovery drink. All those things that we talk about when you're training, getting into those training sessions in the summer, they still apply.
Yeah, 100%. And they're so accessible when you're at home. So there's not really, the problems of running out or not having a gas station to stop at to refill. All those things aren't there. So we really don't have much of an excuse to screw up our nutrition when we're riding inside at home.
It's good practice, good training for your gut at that point if you're doing the longer distance.
Yeah.
And then there's the post-ride, most important post-ride things.
You got to drink water. Yeah. So I always say, try to get in a bottle of fluid, and depending on how long your ride was, that could be electrolyte drink, that could be water within the hour after you're done. Most of us are not coming off the bike fully hydrated. So the faster you can hydrate, the more you're going to recover. And eat, right? Eat a recovery snack or a recovery shake or something as quickly as you can, ideally within that first half hour after you get off the bike, or if you're running after, whenever you're finished your workout. That's going to, again, help you recover the most quickly. It's going to help stop those late night cravings for junk food and carbohydrate. It's just going to give you the most benefit for the workout that you just did. So make sure that you're eating and you're drinking right after your workout. That's the key that I would like to drive home.
Yeah. And the other thing that we always forget to do is stretching. When you come off that bike, you probably have to wipe things down and all the rest of you just want to get those shoes off. But it's a good time just to take, even if you're doing, just a couple of quad stretches, a couple of figure 4 glute stretches, just a couple of things to open up the front of your hips and get that, it'll go a long way to helping you recover, but also not develop some of those issues that happen when we don't do stretching. And your body's warm at that point. You might as well take a few minutes, get your heart rate down, wipe down your bike so it doesn't get all crunchy and messed up, and then you're all set to go.
Great advice. Awesome. So we hope that you guys took something away from this chat. We hope that we can teach you something every time that we're here. If you would like us to cover something related to endurance sport and training at some point, please send us an email and we're happy to kind of add that into our schedule. Again, send us an email, clperformancetraining@gmail.com. And we look forward to seeing you guys again in 2 weeks. What are we talking about in 2 weeks, Sandie?
Something else?
I think it's running form. But anyway, we'll be back here. We'll let you know ahead of time what's on our schedule for 2 weeks from now, but it'll be something really good that you should show up and watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Have a great day, everybody.